Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. This is the debrief of Bristol City 0, Burnley 1 as the Clarets recorded another away victory, another clean sheet and another 1-0 win. 10th clean sheet of the season and Jadon Anthony's second goal of the season, enough to see the Clarets come away with a deserved 1-0 victory. And in all fairness, it probably should have and could have been a little bit more comprehensive. A slightly depleted pod squad. It's mainly the three without any hair. Myself, Andrew Greaves, Paul Woodhouse and Simon Evans. And before we get on to the football, we've just been discussing what we've been eating today. So we're going to do a bit of a Clarets cookery selection. I've literally called it that just because the two words begin with C. So, Simon, as I came on, you were just describing your woes of not having any gravy over there in Miami. I'm guessing our Bistro or whatever it's called is not available in your 7-Eleven or whatever you've got over there.
There'll be some sort of Latin browning liquid or something that you can get. But, I got caught out. I'd gone to all the trouble of roasting a pork and doing my Jamie Oliver style roast potatoes, roughing them up a little bit and then putting them in some hot olive oil and spraying a bit of olive oil on top of it. 45 minutes for a spud is a bit of an effort, isn't it, compared to the old air fryer chips it is anyway. And then realised I'd no gravy. I got all this roast pork and carrots and veg and roast potatoes and no gravy. The only thing I had in the house that were in any way sort of brown and liquidy was this tin of beef stew. I don't know where it come from. Somebody must have, I don't know what. I mean, wife's been to food bank again or something. I don't know what's gone on, but it's like it's a fairly horrible thing, but I blended it up. It weren't working. I was putting Worcestershire sauce in it, just getting vinegar. And then mustard, which is, as Jamie Oliver would say, like best mates with pork, innit, mustard. Mustard in there with the browny, beefy flavoured tin. It worked as a sort of substitute gravy, really. I'm not saying I put it on chips. I'm not going that far, but just to sort of, complement the roast pork and the roast spuds. But what did you have, Greavsey?
I had smoked chicken risotto. It sounds quite fancy, doesn't it?
Oh, it sounds fancier than a liquidised beef stew can.
Stag chili or whatever you had poured all over your pork. Very nice. Yeah, with the in-laws had been to the Glass and Dock, if anyone knows it, near Lancaster, and picked up some smoked chicken. And my wife, who is a very good cook, turned it into a rather delicious smoked chicken risotto with green beans and Parmesan and all of that carry on. So I'm quite full. I'm ready for a lie down after we finish recording this podcast.
Did you finish it off with the butter at the end? A little bit of butter in there?
No, we didn't do the butter. No, we didn't do with the butter. No. We've also got some nice olive oil, which she said she was going to pour over the top, but didn't. So 7 out of 10 for this week's Sunday efforts. Woody, what about you? I mean, you're a little bit behind. You're kind of coming up to Sunday tea, I guess, or late Sunday lunch. What have you had for your food? The listeners are going to be wanting to know this.
Yeah, they are. I had to re-eat last night's Sloppy Joe's.
Oh, that's nice, though.
You have to tell people what a Sloppy Joe is, would you?
You don't really. Not after you've gone through that stag beef chili. It's like, the poor cousin to a stag beef chili. It's the stuff that you don't put. It's like, I don't know, it's a weird concoction of slop that presents itself as some kind of Tex-Mex kind of bloody bolognese thing that you put. It's like a minced butter. Slop. That's
Sounds brilliant.
Yeah,
it sounds decent.
Well, it's in a tin, isn't it? It's in a tin, and it's like your most basic spag ball in a tin that you put in between hamburger bun, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And the sloppy bit is when it just like basically shoots out of the sides, goes everywhere, and you go, shit, why did I just make that? Yeah.
I do like a bit of leftover chili on top of a stale baguette.
Yes.
with a load of cheese on top of it, and then putting it under grill, so it's like a chili cheese toasty, really.
Yeah. Oh, a Wendy's chili and a baked potato will never do you wrong.
That's true. You don't get much Wendy's in England, do you?
No.
You don't. I did read somewhere that they are starting. I read on one of the nationals that Wendy's are launching a British invasion. They're hoping to have 600 restaurants in the next 5 years. Apparently,
They're good. They're good at Wendy's. I like Wendy's. Yeah, they're all right. There used to be one at Piccadilly Circus in London. Just one. They did exactly the same when I lived in Budapest at Octagon, which is a similar sort of place. They had a big Wendy's. They were right next to
they did.
Our office. We were right next to our office, so we treat ourselves to a chili and the burger on a Friday, yeah.
Well, the take-out joints are available, yeah.
Yes, definitely. Well, I think if Russell Ball's listening, which we know he does, I think we've presented a few ideas for
sloppy joint Bob Lord standard, cause complete chaos.
It would be chaos, because it'd be too hot.
Sloppy joint over your blanket. I mean, that is kind of dry clean only blanket. Although I have to say,
burns.
Simon's tinned stew blitzed up and sounds slightly more appetising than some of the pies me and Justin have been subjected to in the James R. Greaves upper over the last couple of years. So, well, I'll tell you what. I mean, Footy Scran on Twitter has managed to gather himself quite an audience. If we do not hit 100,000 on social media after that opening segment, I don't know what we have to do to get to that.
There's an American version of Footy Scran appeared now.
Is that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's part of the same media empire or if somebody's just ripping him off, but Sports Scran has appeared, and there was a big row over the price of a hot dog at Nashville in MLS. I saw that where it'd been overpriced. Trusted the listener who'd sent in a picture of like some miserable looking piece of food and 2 drinks and said it cost $45 when it cost nothing like that. But anyway,
that's a lot.
But yeah. Footy Scran's great. There's a good pie guide as well. Do you follow him at all?
A good pie guide, yeah. Big fan of that. Big fan of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we hope if you did travel to Bristol City on Saturday, you were able to fill your faces with some lovely scran and maybe have a bit of scrumpy as well while you were down there. But we will talk about football. We will kind of talk about Saturday's 1-0 win. And Simon, I would suggest we've been for weeks and weeks and weeks saying at some point it is going to click. It did feel, first half from a shape point of view, second half, first kind of, maybe after the first 5 minutes, but certainly for a kind of block of 15, 20 minutes, it felt like the kind of Burnley that I think we've all been wanting to see, didn't it, in terms of attacking intent, pressure, piling forward. It only looked like a matter of, we're going to get a second at any point, didn't it?
Still not enough chance creation, was there? Still not enough chance creation. But you're right about the shape. I mean, it was like, it was fantastic, that shape. I really liked it because we seem to have an extra man all the time, didn't we? Which is when it's working and it's moved. The passing was way crisper, solid at the back, midfield moving around, Brownhill's going into the right places. I think really Jay playing at centre forward, while clearly, he's not got the pace that he used to have. And maybe not quite the presence, but he's so intelligent as a footballer, using all the experience, and he became a focal point as well, because there was always that person in the middle, and he had a couple of chances himself, but also they played off him, ball passes off him and so on. So it worked really well. That first 45 minutes, I thought we strutted as well as we strutted all season, to be honest. I mean, there was nothing... we looked in total control. The dial had definitely moved definitely moved towards more towards the VK style, if not the VK madness, because it was very organised and very well disciplined. And obviously, second off, we came under a lot of pressure and it was back against the walls. And it was interesting watching Parker's interview after the game, which I was really impressed with because I agreed with every single word he said. But he also, I don't know if it was a bit noisy around where they were doing the interview and he had to speak up a bit, but he came over really passionate while he was doing it with his voice. And he was really pleased about, the way they ground it out in the second half. I would have liked to have seen us manage it a bit better. I'm sure he would as well. But great win and a really encouraging first half performance. Not there yet, but you can see what he's trying to do, can't you now? It doesn't feel like a few weeks ago we were saying just how negative and miserable and nothing some of these performances were. This was far away a different league to that.
Yeah, and Woody, I think we've said before, a lot of the performances have been 6 out of 10 and very, very good, very kind of consistent at that level. This felt like nobody really dipped under a 7 or an 8, didn't it? It was kind of, Anthony, we've been saying, go and beat your winger, go and beat your man, on that wing, drive with purpose. I mean, the way he comes in, I think he said on Francis Benali on comms over here, was saying kind of, he's not sitting on the touchline watching what's happening in the box. He spots an opportunity and he thinks, I want to be there. There's a real drive to that. Cullen, I think, probably had his best game of the season. So maybe we've hit upon, beforehand, I kind of thought we'd probably miss Laurent in that centre, and Hannibal, I've kind of thought, is a bit of a busy idiot at times, runs around without really having much purpose. But all of these players started to unlock things for other people, didn't it? We've kind of wondered before whether you need Hannibal and Brownhill, but actually the two of them unlocked each other's game to a certain extent, didn't they?
Yeah, the progression yesterday, we've kind of gone from how the hell are we ever going to create another chance? And to Simon's point, yeah, there's still a little bit of improvement there. But we've now moved to, we should have put that game to bed, which felt like a definite move forwards. And they could have been forgiven yesterday for putting in a very, very scrappy performance, considering the conditions, considering how blustery and damp and wet and miserable everybody looked at. Within the ground, nobody was sat on the bottom tiers, whether they were all huddled behind, because it was
that away end looked miserable when they showed it before kick-off, didn't it?
Isn't it just, and the fact that we managed to, string together some decent little passages of football, in fact, some very impressive passages of football, was, we'd obviously been working on some things these past 2 weeks, and those little inside balls, etc., looked to be coming off, and like I say, with J-Rod being that focal point, those couple of headers, and of course, we still maintain that solidity at the back. There were a couple of times, I think, where they opened us up, especially, towards the latter part of the second half. But we seemed to cope with everything really quite nicely. And I thought on both wings, especially first half, Anthony was causing problems. And obviously, Koleosho on the left actually coming in and doing that thing with being able to beat his man with pace was causing problems. And with J-Rod, that focal point, I'd like to see, I think we'll see probably if Brownhill's got a bit of an injury, that, Hannibal may be able to come into his own a little bit and own the midfield a bit more. And that'll be nice to see him start to get a little bit more game time in that maybe a bit more of a number 8 position, because he does like to get himself about the pitch a bit. But I think all told, it was a lot better day at the office, and still a lot of improvement to come, I think.
Best 45 minutes since those. I mean, if we don't count the first 2 games of the season because it were basically a different team, would you say, Greavesy, best 45?
Yeah, I think best 45, like you say, taking into consideration the conditions as well. And then, like I say, that second half period for me, I think was when we were attacking and, literally Bristol City could not get out the half. And it was, like you said, Simon, it looked like we had an extra player. Such was that kind of, ferocity of us keep recycling the ball back. But I wanted to just touch on Hannibal with you, Simon, because I think, we said last year we didn't really have a player in the Barnes mould. Now, I don't mean position-wise, but I mean somebody who's a bit of a shithouse, who don't mind getting kicked, don't mind giving it about. We looked a bit soft last year, didn't we? We looked like there were nobody who would, Lorenz or whatever he was called, when I've already forgot him, that kind of mad fullback that we had. Assignon, that's it, weren't it? Laurent's Assignon.
Big favourite of Woody's was Assignon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We kind of had him, but we didn't have anybody. I mean, again, Hannibal causing all sorts of issues, clapping all 4 sides of the ground when he was going off and things like that. And you could just tell, can't you, that he's somebody who brings that energy that we perhaps definitely missed last season. But do you think now, kind of, if Brownhill is going to have a break through injury, and it looked, he's not the kind of player to go off. I guess he barely misses any minutes, does Brownhill?
Didn't want to go off either, did he? He was doing everything he could to stay on, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, again, the dynamic changes? Laurent comes in, he's a bit of a, he drives that ball, doesn't he? And he's kind of almost seen as the kind of first replacement if Hannibal's playing and, almost talking himself into a second yellow. How do you see the dynamic changing in that midfield should we have to shuffle for the game against Stoke on Tuesday night?
Yeah, it'd be a shame if we do, because I thought Brownhill played well yesterday as well. He was getting into those positions again, and he was making those runs, and those runs, they do give us something different. They break the line, don't they? He gets in there as like almost an extra support striker, and we don't really have many players who can do that. I'm not sure that Hannibal can. Thing about Hannibal is like the difference between him and Barnes is Barnes would do the shithousery with a straight face, right? And without actually drawing too much attention to. We over the years got to understand what he's doing, that all that constant backing in, and God knows what else were happening while they were backing into the opponent's groin area or whatever. But he was like, Barnes would do that without getting himself into trouble, whereas Hannibal's shithousery is constantly on the edge of him getting a red card, or a second yellow. So he does have to watch it, because I think he winds himself up as much as he winds the opponent up, So you could see yesterday Parker getting quite agitated about worrying about him going down to 10 men with him yesterday. So he does have to sort of find a way to rein that in and channel his shithousery in the most effective way, which I think he can do. But yeah, the midfield, we'll see. I mean, the almost obvious thing is that Laurent would come in, and that does change the dynamic a little bit. I also wonder, whether we might see, if not starting, but coming off the bench, we might see your favourite, Greavsey, the Masengot.
Well, this is the other thing, isn't it? I mean, he would be my kind of, or one of my choices. I do like Laurent, and I've kind of pushed for him to perhaps replace Cullen and in that midfield, because I think he offers a bit more energy. But I think Cullen, perhaps has been a bit of a victim of the system and what he's been asked to do. Whereas yesterday, I just felt that, the Hannibal, Brownhill kind of and Cullen triangle really worked, because it allowed Cullen to do what he does best.
Well, he was back to doing what he did under VK, wasn't he? Yeah. He was the outball from the defence. He was building everything up. We did actually do a little bit more of that playing out from the back, stuff, and I think Cullen was quite central to that, really. But maybe that's also the defence feeling so much more comfortable with all these clean sheets as well.
Yeah.
I thought, before we forget, but I thought Egan Riley was outstanding yesterday. I thought he's really matured in the confidence. Yeah. You can see every game he's getting better and better. And this is a player who none of us would have blinked an eyelid if he'd have left the club in the summer. Yeah. We didn't. No one really thought he had a future.
No. Well, we were up against a player who really is probably, Egan Riley Mark II in Luke McNally, weren't we? And he's had to go elsewhere to find his games and things like that. But Woody, I mean, we at the start of the season, or when Egan Riley came in, we were a bit like, Christ, let's get a central defender back as quickly as we can, because there was that he'd been at, I think it was kind of PSV's young team in the second tier last year, weren't it? And then prior to that, he was at Hibs, and you kind of think it wasn't really the trajectory we were expecting to see a player who would, come into the first team. If you think about what Twine did, he left. McNally, he left. Zarora, he left. He was almost on that kind of, exit door trajectory, weren't he? And I think it's fair to say the first couple of games, we were a little bit nervy as he kind of found touch, in the close to his own byline and things, rather than trying to get it further upfield. But Simon's right; he has matured into a really, really solid centre half with a really good relationship. It looks like with our friend E. Steve.
Yeah, I think, like you say, had everybody been fit, he probably would have been out the door. There's absolutely no way he would have got a chance, is there? And now you're kind of questioning, how did he never get any game time? Because he's actually got up to speed relatively quickly. Like you say, it was only really a couple of games, and then he's settled in extremely nicely. Yeah, and he's not the quickest by any stretch, but his range of being able to ping 40-yard balls out to the wing is getting quite impressive. He almost feels like a little bit of a poor man's Taylor Harwood Bellis in that regard, and Yeah, he hasn't really necessarily put a foot wrong. And if you think about the vast majority of games, there is, we've been whining incessantly, but there's a reason why we've got such a good defensive record, and nobody's coming past us. They don't even look like coming past us, and that's tantamount to
It's half the job, isn't it?
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's those two have done an exceptional job between them. And Egan Riley's got to take the plaudits. It's got to be his place to lose, hasn't it? Now.
Yeah, I think it is. And you look. Well, if you look at if all our central defenders were fit at the start of the season, there's no place for him there, is he? He's well behind Ekdal. He's well behind Bayer. And he's probably behind. Well, he would have been behind Hannes Delcroix, who played in the Premier League last year. When
Joe Worrell as well. When
Joe Worrell, and then you brought in Egan as well, who you wonder if he wasn't a sort of safety blanket for if Egan Riley didn't work out as well as they'd hoped, and he hasn't really been called on until late on yesterday. But it just goes to show what a fine margins there are in players' careers, doesn't it? Because had those players been fit, he's out of Burnley and he's on loan at somewhere. Wherever he's down at Millwall on loan or wherever he goes, and then his career is on a totally different path. Now he's established himself as a starting centre half in a team that's in the top 4 in the Championship, possibly heading back to the Premier League. And his career, is completely different. Suddenly he looks like a player who was, developed by Manchester City, signed by Vincent Kompany for Burnley, and was part of their team that, made the push back to the Premier League this season. So, a completely different career path to what it could have had.
And credit him for taking that chance, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Huge credit to him.
Yeah, I read somewhere as well that in his one Champions League appearance for City, his passing success rate was 95%. So Woody mentioned his kind of range of passing. I mean, it's when you've been schooled at a kind of decent development. Talking of former Man City players who've been schooled at a decent school of development, James Trafford. I mean, often much maligned, but again, a 10th clean sheet of the season, 9th for him. Only called into action once, and I think we were both saying on the WhatsApp group, Woody, he initially looked a bit hesitant. Then all of a sudden, he's got this ability to be on top of the player and ends up winning a goal kick as well with his save back onto the player. I mean, there looks to be a confidence there in that back 4 with the ball at his feet. Difficult conditions. I've seen a few kind of rather funny own goals or incidents across kind of social media with goalkeepers getting the wind wrong. But he seems to be getting this ability of when to play out from the back, when to kick it long, when to look for a Josh Cullen coming back towards him from midfield. There does appear to be a confidence growing there within James Trafford, and that seems to be spreading across that back 4, doesn't it? They feel like they can trust him as a goalkeeper.
Yeah. I mean, it almost has to be like a really weird season for him this year because he has very little to do. I don't think I've seen a keeper have to do as little as James Trafford has to do. But when he obviously gets called into having to do something, he invariably doesn't screw it up. I mean, do you see that Salah goal against Southampton today when they went 2-2? It was a very similar situation. Yeah. And there, that McCarthy, he kind of hesitated a little bit, sold himself, and it was, but with Trafford yesterday, we thought that he'd kind of done a similar thing, but the way he raced off his line, and it's something that I've seen quite a lot from him, he's bloody quick at coming off and closing it down. It seems to shock, the striker. But it's got to be fairly difficult to only have 1 or 2 things really to do per half to be called upon. And to your point, he's starting to make those decisions because we know we saw a lot of it over the past 2 seasons, how instrumental your goalkeeper can be as a sweeper keeper. And we've also seen that it's not necessarily his strongest point, but he's learning when to play a little bit shorter, knowing when to go long, and not always having to try and find that Muric type pass. And I think that slight difference in when to get rid and go long versus go a little bit shorter is looking better in doing that. So fair credit to him.
Yeah, but I would still say with Trafford that if we're looking bigger picture, longer term, he's not having a lot to do yet. So I haven't completely forgotten everything that happened last season because he's having some really quiet games. Yeah. And if we get to the end of the season and it carries on like this all the way through, and we do go up, do you look at that last season and think, are you fully confident of him being your Premier League goalkeeper? I'm still not 100% sure on that, but he's doing really well, and credit to his attitude as well, because by all accounts he was quite close to leaving the club over the summer and probably was a bit disappointed not to, you would imagine. So he's knuckled down and got on with it, and he's playing. You can't, like you say, you can't fault him for anything really.
Yeah, and Simon, how much do you put that down to, and not just him, but the Egan Riley, the development of Jadon Anthony, down to the work of Scott Parker? Because I think we were all a bit swept away by VK's kind of rhetoric when he first came in, and we thought, bloody hell, this guy's like the most amazing man manager, and he talks a really good game, and then it proved to be a little bit bullshit, didn't it? Psycho babble and all of that nonsense. But we Scott Parker, that doesn't, and I agree with you about his interview post-match, there seems to be a real level-headedness about Parker. And, when he spoke before, he says, I love developing players on the training field. I love that ability to kind of make individual players better. It seems to be working. I mean, everything that we see in training, the kind of videos and the pictures the club put out, and I know they're not going to put out the bits where, Scott Parker's screaming at some 30-odd-year-old Icelandic and telling him it's life and death and all of this nonsense. But I mean, it just genuinely seem to be, when you see the interactions after games, you see the interactions when players are coming off, when they're disappointed that they're coming off, he seems to have really kind of tapped into what this squad of players, which probably for the most part, those who were still here from last season, probably having to almost rebuild the confidence in a lot of these players after what would be a really scarring experience. Yeah,
I think that last point is really crucial to it. Yeah, I think that was what I really liked more than anything in that first 45 minutes yesterday on Saturday was we looked, that swagger was back, the confidence was there, the players seemed to know what they were supposed to be doing, what they were expected to do, where the other teammates were going to be. That takes time. That takes a lot of time to gel and build in a team. And it really is a new team in a lot of ways. Thing I like about him, we don't get to see what goes on in the training ground. We don't overhear the conversations in the dressing room, so we don't really know. But from the public persona of Scott Parker, I really get the feeling that he gives a shit. I know every manager cares about the results and their team doing well, but he genuinely seems really into it. He's quite intense, isn't he, when he talks about it? And he was saying his comments about J-Rod yesterday. He could have just said, we expect that from an experienced player coming in. He brought valuable experience, blah blah blah. He didn't. He said he was almost speechless in how much he appreciates Jay's attitude and all that kind of stuff. And you sort of think, J-Rod's been out of that side most of the year, hasn't he? Yeah. Sat on the bench, odd late appearance and that sort of thing. Probably, that's a potentially dodgy situation for a manager to have a local-born popular player, your most experienced player in your squad, not playing regularly. He could start grumbling, he could start mumbling, he could start poking holes in what you're trying to do and undermining you and all that kind of stuff. There's plenty of that goes on in the game. And not that J-Rod would be that kind of player, but he put up with a lot last season, and then it's probably been quite disappointing that this year, the way it's gone for him. But the way Parker talked about him, he was so effusive in his praise for him, and it seemed genuine. He seems very passionate about the players and what he's doing with them, and that's good to see. And I think yesterday he was probably a bit fired up because he'd started to see all that work that they've been putting in that hasn't been working, that has resulted in those frustrating 0-0s and those lucky 1-0s and all that. He'd started to see the light at the end of the tunnel from all that work.
But also, let's not forget, you mentioned leading to 0-0s and 1-0 defeats, but also leading to some Burnley fans, openly messaging Alan Pace going, Van Nistelrooy's left United, can we get him in instead of Parker?
Happy birthday to your missus, get Rude in.
That's all that was one of the messages. and I copped a load of shit off somebody. A couple of people going, "Oh, stop banging on about league positions. It's bloody rubbish." This not. And listen, we haven't turned the corner fully, but I do just think, not to use a Will Smith, but get Scott Parker's name out of your mouth kind of thing, because I think he gets a really bad rep because of, people have clung on to what Fulham fans and Bournemouth fans have said. But there's two things for me. I absolutely agree with the Jay stuff in terms of the way we speak about Jay. But also, I think to be a Burnley manager, I think you've got to get the community. I think to a certain extent, Company did. But perhaps, we didn't see as much community interaction with Company. Scott Parker visited a special school in Burnley this week. There's a brilliant video that the club have put out. And I think he gets the town in the way that Dyche did. You know what I mean? I think Dyche, I remember interviewing Dyche in his first press conference in a round table, and he said, one of the first things his dad did was basically sit him down and say, do you know what you're taking on here? Don't screw it up. Burnley's this kind of town and this kind of football club. So I do wonder whether that kind of, Scott Parker and, he gets the players, he cares for the players. It's less, I think, about his reputation and more about, wanting to do a good job. Almost feels like him as a player transporting into a manager, doesn't it, Woody, in terms of all the values that he brought to his playing career?
Yeah, it feels like it's personal to him as well. There's no sense that he's just going through the motions. He's not just saying things for the sake of it, because we know it's very, very easy for certain folks to be able to do that. But I think, to your point, he understands what he needs to do in order to get, it's not just getting the players on board, that's one thing, but he also knows he has to get the fans on board. And in order to get Burnley fans on board, you have to buy into and go some way into understanding what the idea of a community club is. Because there are, everybody likes to say it, and there are only a handful that are genuine community type clubs that really do personify everything a town is about. And Burnley is one of those. And he seems to have grasped that. And I also think he's under no illusions as to what that takes. He doesn't just think that will come to him relatively easily. There's a certain humility to him, and I think it comes across in a lot of his interviews and his conversations. And a lot of the criticisms people said were that he sometimes spoke with his emotional sense and his heart on his sleeve to a greater or lesser degree, and you can sometimes see that it matters to him, and I think that goes a long way with regards to a manager. You want him to give a shit, you want him to feel it when they're not necessarily doing too well, and I think you've got to give him a little bit more respect than we have done in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, one of the things I really like about him as well, and it may be because of the kind of questions he gets asked as opposed to the kind of questions that VK got asked, but he's not talking about his philosophy all the time. He's not talking about himself very much at all. Yeah. He's talking about the players and the team and the performance and the fans. And I think that's a really good approach for a manager to take, especially with a club like Burnley. And you make a rod for your own back sometimes as a manager if you're constantly talking about philosophy and ideas, because it's never always going to work out like that. And you can hit those patches. And you've got to have built up the kind of reputation that Guardiola has to get through 5 defeats without people questioning your philosophy, haven't you? So I think it's refreshing. I like everything that I hear from him, really, because I think a lot of it is, like they say in other professions, show, don't tell. And the proof of his work was there yesterday in that first 45 minutes. And only 45 minutes. We keep saying 45 minutes because it was. The second half wasn't good enough. We battled it out and did it, but it was alarming the way we let the control of that game slip against Bristol City. But I feel a lot more confident about this team and everything that's going on after watching that, because it was a statement 45 minutes. It was a statement 45 minutes, though.
Just the last thing on Scott Parker before we go on to briefly talk about Coventry City at home on Tuesday night. I don't know if either of you guys have seen it, but I'll stick it in the WhatsApp group. But there's a brilliant video where somebody's mashed up his post-match Fulham interview at Wembley with Dry Your Eyes by the Streets, and he's, it fits almost it's seamless. It really is. It's fantastic. And he's commented on it, since then, saying how much he likes it. So I think, again, just showing his character, I think it shows that he's quite happy to laugh at himself. He's quite humble. He's quite, modest with these things. But yeah, we'll perhaps share that on our socials as well, just to give you a glimpse of that, because it is well worth seeking out if you've not seen it. So looking ahead to Coventry on Tuesday night, a chance to get back to Turf Moor. Coventry not having the best of seasons. Mark Robbins, longest serving manager, I think, in the EFL. Potter currently in 17th. Position in the championship table. Woody, I mean, they perhaps will provide a similar kind of opposition to some which we've struggled to break down previously in home games, or not been able to quite find the better of. But this will be a big test for us, won't it, on Tuesday?
They all are, to a greater or less degree, aren't they? But Coventry are doing that Coventry thing again, aren't they? By starting off absolutely appallingly, and then starting to string one or two results together, and it's all a little bit patchy. And they struggled against Sheffield United a little bit after Sheffield United went down to 10 men, even though stats-wise, they look like they battered them a little bit. So they look like they've turned a little bit of a corner, but is it enough? Have we turned more of a corner than they have? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. It'll be even more interesting if Frank Lampard is sat on the bench for Coventry, and there's quite a few reports saying he's in advanced talks to take that job. They'd have to be fast to get him in place for midweek at the Turf, but that would be an interesting twist, wouldn't it? After Lampard was in talks to join Burnley, or on the shortlist at one time.
Yeah, apparently so. But I think that almost looks certain, doesn't it? That he's he might not be on the bench, but I know the Sky kind of studio pundits were making a bit of a joke and saying, "Hello, Frank, if you're watching," on the Saturday before that game. But Rhys Carr, I think it is, who's in charge. Not much known about him. I think he's worked in kind of development squads and things. But they made the point on Sky actually before that Sheffield United game, Simon, that he's almost in a position where he knows somebody else is coming in, so he's not playing a game to try and get the job. And what he has done, 2 consecutive 2-2 draws, I think, Sheffield United and Sunderland, horrible run for them. Sunderland, then Sheffield United, then us. It kind of, the shackles are off a little bit unusually for a caretaker manager who knows he's not going to get the job. Do you think that poses more of an issue, and that freedom perhaps, may play into our hands? Or do you think it may be kind of our undoing a little bit?
Well, you can still get a bit of a bounce, can't you, even then? You remember when, Mike Jackson took over from Sean Dyche, and, nobody at the time thought we were going to get a Mike Jackson bounce, but we did for a bit, It didn't work out in the end, but so that adds a layer of complication to it, but, these are the ones we're to be winning. They are, aren't they? We're to be picking up 3 points. We're to be following up that good result at Bristol City with a win there, and then Saturday at Stoke get something out of that game, because Stoke, they're the ultimate average club, aren't they, really? What is it like, five
wins, 5 losses, 6 draws, 20 scored, 20 conceded. But I've just put that out thin air, but
yeah, me too. Yeah, so
11th in the table. Excellent. Well, I tell you what, let's leave it there. We will be back on Thursday. Apologies to everyone who missed us. We're back on Friday. We'll be recording on Thursday, so apologies to anyone who missed us last Friday. We were looking at some kind of set-piece interviews to try and get a guest on, but with the international break and very little going on, we felt we'd come back with a bang, knowing that Burnley would get a victory at Bristol City, knowing we could start your week positively. So we may do we might get you two over to do a debrief after a comprehensive win against Coventry City on Tuesday night, if we win comprehensively. But
let's see.
We'll see about that, but we will definitely be back on Friday. Hopefully with a full pod squad. Chris and Justin coming back into contention. I think they're both back on the grass, as we like to say in football parlance, which means you won't see Justin for about 6 months, and Chris will be the magic Mike of the operation. But
we nearly got through a whole podcast without mentioning him there.
I know. People get triggered when Magic Mike doesn't get mentioned. because I get text messages off about 5 or 6 people going, he mentions everybody else but Mike Trezor, and I keep saying, just forget about Mike Trezor until you see him on a team sheet or you see him holding up an IX scarf in January. It doesn't really matter. We've kind of gone past that point. But anyway, happy Monday. Hopefully the weekend's result has started your week on a high despite the weather here in England. We will see you on Friday. Until then, up the Clarets.